Hey, good evening. How's it going? All right. Thank you for joining me this evening. We are going to be kicking off tonight our session number 4, which is all about correcting mistakes. Okay, so one of the things that I want to say right up front is that for this session, this is going to be for correcting mistakes more or less after the fact. Okay, so this is not going to be about how to clean your canvas, right? Or what products to use to start over. I want you to have a very open mind, and I want you to be flexible for this. This is going to cover things like, let's just say that your spacing is off, right? Either you're doing something freehand, or maybe you're following a pattern of somebody else's, and maybe your spacing has gotten off. Whether that be because maybe you've used a different kind of tool, a different tool size, maybe just grabbed something incorrectly, maybe just didn't quite judge it correctly. Maybe if you're anything like me, every now and again, I still screw up my guidelines. I'll just accidentally bump my ruler or something. Okay. And this is especially for if you've done something and your paint is dry, or it's maybe on a surface where you're not going to have a whole lot of luck getting your paint off. Okay. So this is again going to be about how to alter your existing designs. Again, we're altering, changing, creating, and turning mistakes into opportunities. All right, so you do want that flexibility. Okay, so I've drawn up a couple of things here, and this is not going to look like much yet, and I promise it will. So I've drawn up a couple things, and let me tell you, when you're trying to make mistakes and you're trying to kind of get things a little bit off, it's hard. What I want here is to show flexibility, creativity, and I don't want anyone to feel stuck. Especially as a beginner, you're not always going to get everything right, and it's inevitable. So I'm going to show you a few little things that you can do if you get stuck in a situation, some creative options. Okay, so first thing first is mandala. One of the beautiful things about it is its symmetry. And let that symmetry play in your favor. Take 100% advantage of it, okay? Because if your guidelines are off, chances are, most obviously, that guideline goof is going to be affecting both sides of your design. Okay, so you're going to have a gap or kind of a squished area on both sides. So again, play it up. Use that symmetry in your favor. Okay. What I did on purpose here, and I've got this little arrow drawn because I went ahead and drew this out. And you can see this little dot here. This is where my guideline should have been to make it straight across. Okay, so as you can see, these ones are correct. This one is tilted just ever so slightly, right? However, when I did that, it threw this off. Okay, so what I did, I have a 14 here, a size 2 here, okay, and then a size 5 for these, and then I just did some kind of walked dots here. Now you'll see, like I said, this is one that's off, and these two lines, if I'm dropping them right where they should be, we suddenly have no room left over, right? I could not do the other side of my walked dot because there's no longer any room. Well, because it follows this line that I've purposely, thrown off, this over here is the same. Now, they aren't quite as far off, right? Because I didn't do this, at the same angles. But same thing here. I was not able to complete the walked dot series because I would run into a problem. I wouldn't be able to bring them all the way down, and then maybe if I did, they would overlap, or you would have to actually stop one of them short. Same situation here. You know, you could kind of go over the top, but it might be visible, right? These gaps are going to be pretty visible when you go through this. So what do you do with something like this? Now, keeping in mind, probably this could end up anywhere. And maybe if you're lucky, it might be on the bottom. It might be on a corner, something like that. But this kind of stuff can happen. Now, if you're lucky enough, like I've drawn it out here, and you kind of quote unquote catch it in time, you've done all these, then you're like, oh, I can't complete this. Dang it. Go ahead and finish the others, right? This is why I left it like this. So here's one way that I've actually used a number of times to fix this, okay? Before I show you exactly what I've done, I want to mention that there are no rules. Make it your own. Even if you're following a pattern and you screw it up, don't ever be afraid to throw in something of your own. Don't be afraid, be flexible, be creative, go off pattern. It's fine. And in a lot of cases, you're going to love it. You may not feel like it, but I'm going to show you one of my ideas here that I actually have used, and I have the project to show you. So be creative. One of the things I've got here, in addition to those three colors, I've thrown in some green. Doesn't matter, right? It absolutely doesn't matter. But take advantage of these sections to throw in something new. All right, so what I'm going to do, and I just kind of randomly picked something that I knew was going to fit. So this is a 4 for me. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into this green, and we're going to do something a little random. Okay. Now this could really be anything. Okay. So now I've got this little pattern here. I'm going to do the same up here. Doesn't have to be even the same direction. Okay. Now that one went off a little bit because I was trying not to get my hands in it. So there's that. I'm going to wipe my tool off. I had done this a couple of hours ago. And by now, my paint has dried, so I'm going to add a little bit more to my palette here. Just a tiny bit. Okay, and then let's go down maybe to a 1, for example. And let's do a couple of highlights. Okay. Maybe you don't like the dot. And that's totally fine, right? One of the other things that you could potentially do, and I can try this one over here. You know, you can drop in something here. Okay, I'm going to grab my other tool. Actually, let me flip this over so it's actually towards me. Maybe drop in a swoosh. Maybe you can follow this along. Okay. Kind of whatever you want to do. Don't be afraid of just throwing something in there. Because now, and if I was really doing this piece, I would be a little bit more sensitive to sizes and things. But now it might look like a flower. Okay, so you're thinking, well, that's nice. What do I do with that? This doesn't have to be that large, but especially if you get caught on something on the outside of your circle, things like this can really work. What you would do in these situations, though, is maybe like I did here, you might cap that on one of these lines You might continue with your pattern. Let's just say that you wanted to do another set of walked dots here. You absolutely could. Or you could actually just skip over this section completely and maybe consider doing a row of dots out on the outside line. Close it off, right? Make this a whole new row, whole new section. And then you could use this inside to play around. Maybe you like this design and maybe it reminds you of a flower in your garden. Now you've got this whole section here where you could maybe drop in a couple of flowers. You could do some more of these. You could drop in some swooshes. Maybe you just want a couple of extra dots. You know, maybe you want to stretch out some lines here just to fill it in. Completely endless. Okay. Like I said, I've actually done that, and this is not the only one that I've done this way. This was a jar that I created, I don't know, a year ago or so. No, actually it had to have been more closer to 2. So I started out with this original design, and yep, over here, just like here, I accidentally goofed. Okay. And you can see, if you ignore this line here, you can see the space. You can see a whole bunch of extra space here. And it wasn't quite as bad on this side, but there was a bunch of extra space here. So I started to draw these little mocha lines out, and I highlighted it with some other colors and drew in a couple of gold dots and then some extra swooshes here. And then I decided I would go ahead and do that on the other side as well. And so now I've got this matching little set. I even tried to incorporate that on the lid. Unfortunately, something happened to the lid before I varnished it and it smeared. And so I was never really able to correct that. But you can see I purposely squished this over a little bit and I drew my line out and put that on the lid as well. So, I mean, obviously this is, you know, this is one of my older works. So this isn't perfect anyways. But I think it came out okay, right? So that's kind of an option 1. Okay, get that out of there. Option 2, I did the exact same thing here. So again, this particular line, instead of it being straight across, I just skewed it a little bit. Okay, and I got to the point where, okay, I was able to do this row, and I was able to do this row, and I could do this one, right? But obviously there are some of these like this here, you know, especially like this one. There was absolutely no way that I was going to be able to fit anything in there anymore unless, you know, I had to alter it. So you could do a couple of things. So I'm going to use the color green again just to accentuate what I'm doing, but you don't have to make it any different color in this particular situation. So option 1 could be that you just continue, but you stop, right? So you don't go all the way down. You know that it's going to overlap, and you actually just shorten your dot, right? The other section of it though, and what we're really going to look at here is, let's use another element. Okay, so maybe instead, now this was a 1.5. Let's go up. We could even probably do it with a 3. And instead, of worrying about bringing this next one here, instead of bringing it down, you just create this row here. Now you could increase the size again. Maybe you want to go like a 3.5. Let's go back into the purple here. Something like that, right? Now, you don't necessarily have to do this on both sides, but now you kind of have this extra flourish. And again, you can use this over on this side or anywhere else that it doesn't fit. That's another reason I like doing just one side at a time, or I've kind of gotten to the practice when I do my walk dots. I do one side at a time. So that if I've screwed up, I have these options available. I can do something like this. I don't get stuck in a situation where I'm like, I did this one and then I did this one and now I don't have anywhere to go. Right? So that's another thing that might be helpful to pick up. Like I said, maybe just doing one side at a time, just until you're 100% comfortable or you kind of worked out what you want to do. You could also, instead of doing something like this, if you're comfortable enough with swooshes, why not throw some in there? Because the difference is, with the swooshes, you can kind of tailor the line, right? You can bring the tail around and have it stop more or less wherever you want it to. So you can bring it down in the sections where you can. All right. You could, let's see, that's a 3. You could add multiple. Just fill in the space, right? That was a 2.5, then maybe I can go down. I don't know that I'll make a 2, just to kind of give you an idea. Whatever you want to do. Okay. So now you've got this particular section. And again, because it's going to be on the other side as well, you could do the same kind of swooshes, the same kind of dots, and it doesn't have to go all the way around. It really doesn't. You can manipulate it in any way that you like. Okay. You could even throw in completely different elements. You may or may not be familiar with a whole lot of other stuff, One of the things that you could try, I don't know, I don't see a whole lot of diamonds that are worked. But you know what, let me go up to like something like a 4. And a diamond, essentially, oops, use the right side here. Start out with a normal swoosh, right? And then all you do is make a tiny tip. All right, bring that through. Okay. All right, not my best one, but you get the idea. Okay. You can randomly throw in a new design. Hey, now you've got something cool there. Or if you just want to go kind of simple, oh, I ran out of sides almost. Oh, I didn't. Okay. You could just add a large dot. You could just put something there. You could even do, in this case, I did a 4, but you could even do something larger. You could do something like a 4. And then maybe just accentuate the top of it, with an extra dot here. You could make that a crown. By a crown, I mean, 2 smaller dots and 1 larger on top, something like that, or an inverted one. So don't worry about those. Those are almost, I'm going to say, probably the quote unquote easiest to fix, because you have room, right? You have space here to play around in. Right? It's not necessarily in these situations where you're too squished together to do anything. And I get a lot of this stuff where you're going to run into each other or you're going to have these extra spaces, especially if you're going to follow a pattern and maybe you don't have the same tool as the person that is doing the YouTube video or whatever. And maybe you have a smaller tool or a different size. Like I've mentioned before with the tools, they're not all the same. A size 3 flat-headed tool is not the same size as a ball-headed or round-headed size 3. So it's very easy to kind of goof, quote unquote, because it's not screwing up really. It's easy to do that when you're following a pattern and you may not have the exact same set of tools. Okay, so there's that one. Now, At some point in time through our group, Mandala for the True Beginner, there is a guide out there that actually has some photos of some different elements. There are quite a few videos, actually I looked as well, and there are quite a few ladies that do videos, with just gridded paper, and can explore some different elements. Now, honestly, if you go looking for these elements, you will hardly ever find them in mandalas. But I really like the idea that they're out there. And if you want to incorporate something like that, these are really perfect opportunities to do that. Okay. Let's see. Now, let's go opposite. So we discussed, what if you're a little bit maybe too small, you've run out of room here, you have the space to play with, but what if you don't? What if that's backwards? Right? So what if you completely run out of room? Like I showed here. So this is going to be a 5. And let's just say for whatever reason, you decided that you want to use a 4 and then a 3.5. Well, it's large. And yes, you can get probably 3 dots out of it. But if you really want to continue doing a 3.5, there's no way that you're going to be able to fit another 3.5 in here without completely overrunning it or squishing it in. Right. So again, you've either picked a size that's maybe a little bit too large, or you simply didn't have or leave enough room for that particular tool size in your design. Now, I've used a lot of examples where I'm talking about like walk dots, but this can be anything. But I just figured these are probably the easiest way to show this. So what you can do in this circumstance, just sort of like I showed in the other one, one of the things that you could do here is just shorten your dots. Okay, I want a 3.5, and for whatever reason, I don't want to change. I want a 3.5 here. Well, I can't really fit it, but at least I could go maybe 2, right, without getting too bad. So shorten your walk, shorten your design. You're going to have to make an adjustment, squish it a little bit. Okay, so that's not the funnest way to do it, but you absolutely can. If you catch it soon enough, change your tool size, right? Make it smaller. Maybe you've done the first 2 dots and then you realized, oh, I've got a problem. I can't get a 3rd one in here. You can always drop your size at that point. Nothing wrong with that. I do have a very famous instance here where I actually started out wanting to do something, realized I didn't have the room in practice, but I played around with something like shortening the dots in practice, decided I really liked it, and ended up using it in my actual permanent design. And I'll show you that in a second too. So this always doesn't equate to a mistake and just fixing it. You can really make something that you really do like. Okay, so again, if you can catch it early, the easiest way to do it is probably just, to go down a tool size. You don't necessarily even have to make them the same size on either end of your walk, for example. Who says you can't? Yeah. You could then potentially, if you really, really, really wanted to stay with whatever size it is that you're working with, okay, just like we did on the other one, you don't have enough room and you know it's not going to fit. So maybe do a swoosh instead, right? Maybe just bring that down. Okay, now you've got a swoosh there. Now that swoosh can turn into another layer of dots. So you could go up just like you intend to, and then bring a layer of dots around the side still. You don't have to end it with the swoosh. You can put a swoosh in the middle of your walk dots. That works. Okay. You can do 3 dots on this side and 2 on this side, or whatever ends up working. Okay. The other way to fix this is, keep in mind, as you spiral outward, I'm going to flip this over a little. As you spiral outward on the mandala, you're going to gain more and more room. Okay, so again, this part of it is a little bit harder if you're running into less room versus more, because it's going to require you to keep a closer eye on things, because honestly, these squishy ones are a little harder to fix than if you have more room. Okay, so just kind of keep an eye out for it. But one of the things that you can do is move your pattern, move your design outward. Okay, well, how in the heck do you do that? Here's how you do this. Okay, so here I have, it's still a 5, right? But obviously you can see this doesn't fit. This is not going to work, right? But for whatever reason, I want to use my 3.5, right? I want to start with a 4 and I want to work down and I want to do a 3.5, and that's that. You can do that. That's okay. So what I've done here is I've taken the same size. This is a 5, but I've put it on what I call a landing dot. Okay, so instead of just bringing this one down and touching this row, I've put in a 3 here, and then I put the 5, and then just the same as this dot here, I've put the 4. Now, I want to go into my 3.5. Let me actually turn this so I'm not sticking my hand in anything. Now I'm going to go into the 3.5 that I originally wanted to use. And look at that, I've got room. And that's again because I'm spreading my design out. I'm moving it forward and lifting it up and expanding to give myself more room. Now, obviously that doesn't look great. I just picked green, you know, kind of just flying by the seat of my pants here. Okay, because I don't know why anyone would want to do that. But just to show you, even though it's not going to fit here, I now have room because of that 3 dot, that little lift that it gave me. Look at all this room now. I'm not running into anything. Nothing is squished. If I really wanted to do another row now on top of my walked dots, I absolutely could. I likely have enough room to do that. Even if I wanted to use, maybe, I wouldn't, you would probably want to go with 4, right? And then push through there. But look at all that extra room you have now. So again, this might be something that you'll want to try to catch early. And that's sort of why I shadow dot, especially when I'm practicing, meaning that I pick up my tools and I literally do this. Okay, like, is that going to fit there? Okay, yep. I'm going to put a swoosh here. Does that fit? No. Okay, I'm going to go up to a 4.5. Does that fit? That's like, to me, I don't know what you would call that. I don't know if there's a name for it, but I call it like shadow dotting, right? Use your tools, kind of make sure you don't have to follow someone else's pattern exactly. Play around with it. And if you've got your heart dead set on a certain sizing and you're not sure it's going to fit, there you go. Okay. Now, like I was telling you, I did make a mistake like that originally when I was practicing this design. Okay, this might look a little familiar. So I have never removed the tape off of these. Okay, so this right here, these 3 dots, originally, when I went through on my practice, I realized, because I had these ones here, and then I had this dot here, I had put this first. And I realized I wanted to use, I can't remember what size this is. I think this must be a 4 or a 5. I wanted to do the same size dot as this beginning swoosh on this side. And I wanted to bring it all the way down. And I'm like, oh boy, I don't have enough room. Shoot. Okay, well, I'm just going to throw a couple dots here. And I thought, well, I'll fix it later. Let me just do this in my practice and I'll fix it later. Well, as I expanded on this and I started top dotting, and I kind of looked over it in my practice and I'm like, I kind of actually like this. It didn't look exactly like this. It was a little bit messier than that, and I kind of had squished some things around a little. But again, I decided I liked this. So I actually incorporated it into this is going to be my final design. So nothing wrong with kind of making these little short sections. You know, you don't have to force something all the way around. Okay. The other thing is, again, extra space. And I think about 90% of the time, this is going to be most often what we run into as beginners, just because of our tool selection, etc. Right? We find ourselves trying to follow patterns or trying to mimic somebody or just playing around with what we have, and we end up with a lot more space. Okay, we don't end up with dots, for example, that are like this, that are a little closer together. We end up with stuff like this, okay, where our dots are a little farther spaced. And there's nothing wrong with this, but if you do want to close this in, and you do want to fix the quote unquote mistake, got a couple things that you can do. Now, I do have the 0.5 in my hand, so I'll just use this one. Especially in situations like this, where there's a lot of extra space, just do a dot in between, right? So now you can put this dot anywhere, and you can kind of get a little creative with this too. So you could put a dot in the middle. So you can, you know, bring it right smack in the middle. You can put it down here, closer to the center. You can bring it way up so that it's sitting up here, right? So obviously these are tiny dots. You may not see a whole tremendous difference here. That one a little heavier. Or you could even do multiple dots. You know, you can get a couple in there. Right? You could even continue that. You could bring that out a little ways and create kind of a landing, something like we did here, just to sort of sit your next row on. Yep. So that definitely helps to fill in the spaces. Okay. Now that you have this gap, it kind of goes back to this stuff. We have all of these beautiful different designs that we can throw in. We can experiment like crazy. We can go extra large. We can start to drop in swooshes. We can bring stuff around. I'm trying to think of some of the other not very widely used things. You could potentially do, you know, larger dots here. If you don't necessarily want to just continue to bring another row of block dots, you know, you could use dots like this. You know, you can bring them down. Practice your swooshes. You can do all kinds of things because you're going to have all of that extra room. You could even, if you think that maybe there's still a little bit too much space there, which I've kind of felt too, you know, you can, let's go like a 2. You could even start to put stuff in here. You can do dots, you can do swooshes. You can just leave it like that. You know, bring these down. Whatever. This is the time to kind of get creative, get fun, let your personality come out. You know, you could also go a little bit larger with these ones. Like for example, I just grabbed kind of a 2. and go right along the line. And I'm going to go over this. Well, let's do this one here. So you could do something like this, because the next row then will fit in between. And now you have this nice little landing. All right. And maybe you've already done that row that I just did. You know, and you have these extra spaces. Easy enough to fill in, right? So you definitely have a lot of options. You can certainly play around with it as much as you like. Like I said, I certainly hope that this helps a little bit when it comes to, you know, not wanting to toss your piece. Because even if you've done something, maybe even like this, and, you know, maybe you are happy with it and maybe you're not, the next step to fixing it is always to push your design outwards, right? Just to start over, quote unquote, right? So make another line here. Follow your guideline. Separate it. Now you've got two completely different sections. And you can start over on this side of the dots with whatever, you know, really whatever you want to do. One of my upcoming pieces, and I'll kind of show you, this is a little bit of a sneak peek because it's not done yet, but I did something very similar to this. Break your piece up with something completely different, and then you can start over, right? Start over with whatever design it was that you wanted originally. Okay, so like I said, this particular session wasn't going to be all too long today, but I hope it helps. You know, again, take advantage of the symmetry in your piece. Don't be afraid to just throw stuff in there. If you're not quite ready for swooshes, experiment with your dots and your dot sizes and kind of moving them around a little bit. Don't be afraid to create your own designs. You know, if you want to do hearts, if you want to pull swooshes out kind of, you know, in random patterns, try it and see what works. You know, I encourage you though, and one of the reasons I bring this up is that I encourage you, even if you quote unquote screw something up, don't give up on it. Okay, I challenge you, don't throw it in the trash. Don't instinctively, if you're anything like me too, the hardest part for me when I started was that if I seen a mistake like this, my first instinct was to ditch it, right? I wanted to wipe the whole thing. I wanted to throw it away. I was so upset. I would be kind of depressed about it. And I'm like, crap, I'm never going to get this. Don't do it. Follow through with it. And I swear to God, you're going to learn a ton. Stuff like this, even if you decide that you don't necessarily want to do this, but you just go ahead and overlap it, or, you know, you just go ahead and do something like this to where you shorten one side of it. Whatever you do, continue with it. Don't stop wherever you've screwed up. Find a way to make it work. Move it out. Use it as a practice, because I guarantee you, you will learn a hell of a lot more pushing forward and finishing a quote unquote screwed up piece than you ever will by ditching it and starting over. Because the only thing that you learn by starting over is how to do that pattern. You're not learning how to fix your mistake. You're not getting creative, and you're not experimenting with that opportunity and that creative side. You know, really, you have to have an open mind, and you really have to be flexible. And like I said, even if you screw something up, continue it, finish it, find a way to do it, push through. Okay. If you guys have any questions, if there's any other thing that you kind of want to see, any other thing that you might have run into as far as mistakes, give me a yell. Otherwise, I think we're going to wrap this one up. Like I said, this one's going to be pretty short, and I apologize. Usually hang here for about an hour. But yeah, if you've got any other ideas, if you've run into a really good site, for example, another YouTube video, maybe someone has done, even you yourself, have explored some new elements to drop in with something like this, let me know. Let me know. I'd love to share them with everybody, and so you can kind of get on board. All right, but I really do appreciate you guys stopping by. Again, drop any questions or comments, and I think 2 weeks from now is going to be my next session. That's going to be session number 5. And for session number 5, we are actually going to be working on a real project. We are going to start out with a very simple swirl pattern, and we are not going to be using guidelines. All right. It's not as scary as you really think it is, and I'll take you through it. So I look forward to seeing you guys again. That is in 2 weeks. Here in probably a day or two, I will have that particular live stream up and available for you to tag on to and be ready for when it comes out. Okay, well, thank you ever so much for joining me. Have a fantastic evening. If you are watching this after the fact, or even if you run into a question after we have ended the session, feel free to drop it below and I'll get you an answer. All right, take care and enjoy.